I would like to present you our Swiss approach and how we use the EU lab report as a base for notifiable infectious diseases. I'm Oliver, working for Adis. We are a small consulting company around interoperability. And we had the luck to be involved into this project, which is from the Ministry of Health in Switzerland. We'll tell you a little bit about the background, how we developed an implementation guide from that, and what kind of lessons we learned. So, the Ministry of Health in Switzerland, so we are not part of the EU first side, so everything, we have our own regulation how to submit those infectious diseases. So if you catch syphilis or HIV or COVID even, you have to send the laboratory, if it does the test, has to send that information to the federal government, and in earlier times also to the state government. So you see already you had two communication paths. Communication paths were post, fax, email, which didn't hold up very good during the pandemic. So that system was overloaded, and they tried to make some temporary solutions. And then after the pandemic, they started a project called DigiM from 2023 to 2025, how they can digitize this whole notification process. They settled on a two-way strategy. So you have the laboratories, and then on one way, they want to offer an API how you can send in that information, what kind of test you did. And on the other side, because a few tests are not need to be done very often, they want to offer an API for all those different notifications. And the second part is that the laboratories only have to send to a centralized place and not to the states where they belong to, so to facilitate that. In the future, they have an additional, they want to make even a bigger national strategy, but that was the first step going towards digitalization. And as it has been, you have seen it before in the talk from Jose and René. This graphics I've seen has anybody not seen these graphics this week? Perfect. I think the goal of the FHIR DevDays have been achieved. But 2 years ago, HL7 Europe started working on the laboratory implementation guide. There were different meetings, and that's what at the time we got the contract with the Ministry of Health to develop the base for this notification, and I think that was the perfect timing. We had in Switzerland an older CDA-based first draft, but was never put into production, and that was the right timing to help derive from that. How we approach this, so that's the European lab report, which defines how you can structure your lab report. I guess you are now all familiar with it. And the challenge is then how you build this up on. So in Switzerland, we engaged our eHealth competence center that we would like to have kind of a Swiss version of the lab report. And now how to build that up. We decided to build on those core profiles, the ones who were in the plenary this morning. We have also in Switzerland kind of a core base. I would say it's rather base than core, but kind of the general concepts how we exchange data in Switzerland. So we decided to derive the lab report from this core profile, but we take in all the definitions with the impose profile extensions. I personally hope in the future it will give a kind of multi-inheritance, because sometimes it's then difficult to see where the problems are, but that's how we proceeded for now. And then we derived this specific implementation guide, because that's a specific use case, there are specific requirements, this ELM from this base eHealth Swiss HL7 Switzerland lab report. And it's a standard FHIR implementation guide, as you probably already know. What we are very proud of is it's not only a document exchange, but we defined also the API, and the API is FHIR-based. So you send in kind of IHE, MHD, you send in a document where you have the FHIR bundle inside, referenced by a document reference into their system, and you can ask for the status. So I would say it's one of the probably the second or the third API. We are missing in Switzerland a bit API-based FHIR access, but this is one of the projects now also having a FHIR API. This graphics is similar to the one we have seen from our colleagues in Germany, which also Nemio, Victoria showed. So we have the structure of the FHIR document itself, which has this duality with the composition and the diagnostic reports, which then references the observation where you have the information about the laboratory test inside. And as Jose has showed, with the European Health Data Space, we also needed to do a logical model because Switzerland also does like to make regulations, so they have a regulation what kind of information has to be sent. Our approach was this to model this in an element. We tried to do the mapping now kind of with a FHIR path approach that can be maybe made better in a second iteration, but so you can find out in the document to what part of this information would actually map to the ordinance. And we have a few specific requirements out of this ordinance. So we have limitations on personal data. For example, if a person has a positive HIV test, you are not allowed to send all the demographics information, so you have to mask the data. There are some cases where you are allowed only to send the initials, so we had to take those rules into our implementation guide. Then we have different laboratory study types, so easy testing, but then also kind of resistant testing and genotype testing, so this gets a bit more complicated how you can represent those results in the laboratory. And then we had also quite some interesting topics where we have limited with the existing terminology, so we are using low-ink coding for the observation, but sometimes the low-ink code is then not sufficient. You have to add additional information about the specimen or the expecting organism. We have to define value sets for the different interpretation codes. And what they wanted to have, the Ministry of Health, was kind of a general model. And we tried to map that we are not developing for each disease notification our own profile. We made a general concept for all the different diseases, which works about, I think, for 80 or 90%. So we defined concept maps to map from when you have kind of an observation defined by a low-ink code, what we expect afterwards. Do you need to add additional specimen information? And you can then look up, I have this low-ink code, which my lab message is. Then I look up, I see I have to use for this specimen this value set, and then you get the list of these different SNOMED-CT codes in that case, which specify the specimen. And with that way, we have kind of general model, and we didn't need to make a profile for each of those different diseases. And examples are your best friend, so we tried to do for every notification you have to make an example. And this has to be proven, whereas I have quite a lot of examples already, and this has to be proven quite helpful because we have in Switzerland no national terminology service, so you cannot just ask somewhere what kind are the actual value sets we can use for this. So the Ministry of Health has itself a system, so what they do for now, where they manage those terminologies, they export their data over or let it export over an API, but because this is at the Ministry of Health and it's behind a firewall, you have not easy access. So what we do, we export that data into our FHIR implementation guide, and then we publish the current actual value sets in our implementation guides, so the vendor can take this in and use then the current value sets which are valid for this version. We had a few challenges when we developed this model. So the law requires specific data elements to be sent. They are very explicit. So what do you do when there is other data which are out to send, do you forbid everything? So do you make a profiling where you cross out all FHIR element, which is not acceptable? And this was a hard discussion because the Ministry of Health, they didn't want to have additional data. If somebody sends data and then us, we don't take it into our system, so we might be liable. And on the other hand, due to our experience, if you forbid everything, there comes a change and nothing works anymore. You have to do a new release. So it was quite a balance how strict we should do the modeling. In the end up, I think we ended on a good middle ground. So, and FHIR has openness, which is really helpful. So as it's in every case, suddenly you have a use case where the birth date is missing, and then you can bring in an extension, even if you require the birth date, that you have a birth date absent reason. So we managed quite a lot to go this around. And the other good thing is, as the pandemic has shown, you need to have a bit of a flexibility because you need to introduce fast new test results in your system. And they have seen also the need that they have to be a bit flexible. And the approach they took then afterwards is kind of a two-step approach over the API. So if the laboratory sends the data in, they will first do a general validation, which checks if the syntactical structure is correct, if the structure of the lab report is correct, and they return that, and then do a success to the lab, and then they do a stricture validation where they enforce up all the value sets and conditions extreme in more details. So this allows them a bit to filter also in the future if they expect a higher load of messages and turn off maybe in an emergency case the strict validation. What we use for validation is Matchbox. This is an open source FHIR validator we are actively developing, and it's based on the HL7 FHIR Java validator. And we had also some challenges bringing this into production because before it was mainly used in testing environments at IHE connectathons. So one of the challenges was we were not allowed to do any call-outs to the public internet, so that validation has to work in a closed environment. So that means you have to configure that validator to have all packages available. We have kind of simulating an easier internal terminology server because you are not allowed to use a public terminology server. This was working fine. Then the next challenge is they wanted to use that validator in the public cloud. And they say, oh no, you have patient data in your messages, or the messages the laboratory sends. So that's not working okay. You have to remove the patient data or anonymize the patient data before validating. So they, on the API receiving side, they anonymized the patient data. That worked pretty good until they tested the first HIV messages, and then suddenly, where is the error? Everything looks all right. Everything looks all right on the validation. But in the anonymization, they changed the patient data to a non-conformant HIV coding. So, yeah. In the end, they wanted anyway to insource it to their private cloud internally at the Ministry of Health, so we could switch off the anonymization, and that was very helpful. But the other thing is, in today's times of IT, you have security scanning. So we spend now a lot of time, because with each new version of Matchbox we produce, you can for sure be that there is another security vulnerability and you can deploy it. So we spend a lot of time now fixing, but it's also a good thing, fixing all the issues which arise out of the dependent libraries in the validation stack. They started this project with early adopters, 2 laboratories. In 2024, they built up, the FOPH built up a third team that was quite big. They made workshops, make sessions every 2 weeks. They built up a wiki, providing additional guidance and additional information. And the main point afterwards is that this really got in traction, that project, was they changed the ordinance that they require an electronic submission from June 1st. So that puts really pressure, because they will now decommission the existing CSV interface, and until the end of the year, everybody has to send in that electronically. And we have in Switzerland a Swiss Digital Health Project-a-thon, which is a testing event around the electronic patient record in Switzerland. And there we also motivate the laboratories to take part. We will also offer this year. So this is how they tried to bring this project up to speed. And in terms of implementation right now at the moment, they covered now all the notifiable diseases which they have to be sent by the law in that the primary laboratories can send this information over the interface. This will not cover the specialty laboratories with very complicated stuff, but for the general notifiable diseases, this works. They have connected 10 reporting units, so this covers already 30% of the messages they got a year, and they expect that till end of the year. So we have now 60 more reporting units in the onboarding process, and that should cover 90% of the volume. And we have a lot of topics coming up. We have special testing the pandemic readiness still coming up. We have difficulty sometimes to integrate external laboratory systems because they are not officially allowed to send in into the ministry. We have standardization challenges like that we accept Kosovo as a country, but it's not an officially international assigned ISO code, but we are getting there step by step. So there are a whole lot of people involved in this project, either from the FOPH side and also from our side. So a big thanks to them, and I was very happy that I can present that to you. And I think we have still time up for some questions, if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yeah, there we go.
Thanks, Oliver. If I understood correctly, you are running the validation also in the production environment. That with Eve measures, you are coming and you run the validator. To what degree do you see the need to really do this, or would it be sufficient to do it only during onboarding and, well, in certain time intervals to check what is coming in there?
That's a very difficult question. The Ministry of Health says they are the strict ones in that case. They say they want to have every message validated because they want to delegate if it's not validating that the laboratory has to fix the problems before sending in. I'm not sure if they can hold up that forever. I think now during the development phase it was very helpful because you get feedback very early. We have also a lot of still value set changes, which shouldn't be, but it changes really between the different versions. So I think I'm afraid it will stay forever. I personally think at one time you could maybe do a lighter validation even. And we simplified also a little bit, so we use not a full-fledged terminology server, and we don't check every time if all the codes are, or it's limited also in some capabilities.
And do you know how long it takes?
Validation takes typically around a second.
Okay. Any other questions? No.
The HL7 Europe guide is only for lab result. Is your implementation also just a lab result, or also do you do anything with lab orders?
No, it's currently only lab result. We have in Switzerland a project also for doing lab orders, but it has not found yet implementation partners at the moment, I would say.
Okay, maybe a final quick question, or yeah, it's the last one.
Yeah, this should be pretty quick, but kind of following up on what Ruud just asked about, if you're are you going to be following not only the European lab report, but also the universal lab report, work that when we get that fully decided and published, and hopefully we'll get everybody kind of all in sync on this?
I hope so. So we just switched with the latest version. We published to the newest ballot version of the. So we try to be in sync. And but before you publish a new European version, we test all our examples. So all these examples, we say we have also to do integration tests with the validator. So we will be the first one who will get feedback to you if something breaks with our examples. And I mean, this was also a big help. So a big thanks to Giorgio, Europe, and all the others who worked on this EU lab report guide. This has proven to be a very nice ground. And I hope no politicians in Switzerland notice that we are basing on a European project, because that's sometimes not a good thing to do. But I'm very glad that we have a European base lab report as the basis for this project.
You can just use the international, then you'll...
Yes, then we are fine.
Okay, this concludes. So let's give a warm applause for Oliver for this great presentation.
If you want the Matchbox sticker, please show up here. And if you have any questions.